Half to a member of the committee, the ranking member of the Oversight Committee, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Carnahan. Minute and a half.
Gentleman from Missouri is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support the Resolution 268 and call upon my colleagues to support this resolution strongly. It reaffirms the long-held U.S. commitment to Israel and the negotiated settlement by and between the Israelis and Palestinians. The future of Israel is inextricably linked to that of its neighbors in the Middle East and North Africa. And with gas prices rising, conflicts in that region have a direct impact on Americans here at home. I've long supported a two-state solution to the conflict with Israel as the recognized home of the Jewish people and a strong Palestinian state to promote the well-being of the Palestinians as well. The U.S. and our allies must support this process. We must allow the two parties to come together and negotiate a settlement. This is the best avenue to achieve a lasting peace. And I want to say that I strongly oppose Palestinian attempts for unilateral recognition through the UN that would delegitimize this peace process. A fellow Missourian, Harry Truman, recognized Israel within minutes of its declaration of independence. We must continue this kind of support for Israel and for our allies striving for peace together. I urge support of this resolution and look forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle on this issue in the months ahead. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlelady from Florida.
We continue to yield. Reserve the balance of our time until the other side yields back, and then we'll close, Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady continues to reserve. The gentleman from California. The gentleman from California.
How about three? Do you have three? 3.5? You have three, and then you get 2.5.
The gentleman from California.
Yes. Madam Speaker, I'm very pleased to yield to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Moran, 2.5 minutes.
Gentleman from Virginia, Virginia, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my very good friend from California for yielding me the time. Madam Speaker, the Middle East peace process is at risk of collapse, and I believe that only American leadership can save it. Both sides can and should do more to restart negotiations. House Resolution 268, despite the fact that it has virtual unanimous support from this body and includes a laudable reaffirmation of the United States commitment to a negotiated solution to the conflict, in fact falls short of the kind of leadership that I believe is needed. This resolution chastises the Palestinians for seeking to bridge the divide in their own community and for pursuing recognition of their state at the United Nations. The first point, I think we should give the Palestinian Authority, which has done an impressive job of developing institutions and its economy in the West Bank, some credit. They have tried to provide the leadership to pursue the goals that we have encouraged them to do, and they have, I think, done so in terms of developing democratic institutions in a way that we should be proud of because we had a role in that, a major role. There is no indication they have any inclination to allow Hamas to jeopardize those gains that have been achieved in the West Bank. And thus far, the reconciliation agreement between Hamas and Fatah has yet to yield any progress on a unity government. In fact, at this point, it is unclear that it really will. So, in many ways, the purpose for bringing forth this resolution is moot. Should Hamas be invited to join a Palestinian unity government without accepting the conditions of the quartet, the European Union, the United Nations, the United States, Russia, those are the internationally designated bodies that have come forward with an agreement we have agreed to. If they invite Hamas to join a coalition government without accepting the conditions that we insist upon, it will have very serious implications for our relationship, and that should be the reason why we should cut off financial aid. In 2006, Palestinian elections, which in fact were advanced by the Bush administration, that's what brought Hamas into power. In reaction, the United States, as well as the International Quartet, suspended assistance to the Palestinian Authority, and the Obama administration is continuing that policy. There is no aid going to Gaza. We need to recognize that Palestinian unity is crucial to a long-term peace. Gaza's separation Gaza's separation from the West Bank, though, has made it impossible to advance meaningful negotiations with Israel.
Time's expired.
Madam Speaker, there's insufficient time to lay out the other. May I have 15 seconds?
Gentleman,
Okay. Well,
Speaker, I yield 15 seconds.
15 seconds. Gentleman is
I
recognized.
just want to say, Madam Speaker, there's insufficient time to lay out the other side to what has been presented. I don't particularly have strong disagreement with many of the points that have been made, but I do think there's another perspective to this. It ought to be advanced in this body. I thank the Speaker for her time, and I thank my good friend for
Gentleman's
yielding the
expired.
time. Thank you.
Gentlelady from Florida continues to reserve. The gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, may I ask through the chair, does the gentlelady from Florida, the chair of the
If the
committee,
gentleman
have...
would yield. We have 3.5 minutes left approximately, and we have Mr. Burton to close for us. So
Then-
we are
then
waiting
will
for you
yield.
to finish.
Madam Speaker, may I inquire how much time I have?
Gentleman from California has 45 seconds.
All right, well, I yield myself those 45
Gentleman is
seconds.
recognized for 45 seconds.
There are two important issues raised by this one resolution. One seems a little more distant than it did at the time it was introduced, and that was the possibility of a unity government that included an organization that is on our terrorist list, that subscribes to violence, to the elimination of the State of Israel, and refuses to recognize past agreements in a unity government. Hopefully that agreement is, the chances of it are diminishing. The second point is a strategy which violates the Palestinians' own commitments to, that they made in Madrid, that they made part of the roadmap, that were made in the context of the Oslo agreements, that they will negotiate directly with the Israelis to resolve this conflict. I think it is all too appropriate to point out that should they pursue that course, the assistance that we have very generously
Gentleman's
given and
time's
they have put
expired.
to good use might well be terminated, and I urge an aye vote on this resolution.
Gentleman's time's expired, and the gentlelady from Florida.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I would like to yield such time as he may consume to Mr. Burton, a gentleman from Indiana, who's also the chairman of the subcommittee on Europe and Eurasia and our Committee on Foreign Affairs.
And the gentleman from Indiana is recognized.
I thank my chairman for yielding. Israel's right to exist, Madam Speaker, should be guaranteed. And Israel has tried to work out over the years a peace agreement with the Palestinians so that there could be a two-state solution. In fact, twice, once during the term of Prime Minister Barak, and again during the term of Prime Minister Olmert, Israel offered the Palestinians a very generous and fair final settlement. And both times, those offers were flatly rejected and met with violence. And what has the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinians done recently? They went and signed an agreement with Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization that has been lobbing bombs and missiles into Israel, trying to destroy the Israeli state. They are committed to the destruction of Israel. And the Palestinians have signed an agreement on May the 4th of this year to work with them. Israel went that extra step when they allowed Gaza to be turned over or turned open. And what happened right after that took place? Hamas came in there and took over and started attacking Israel day after day. Innocent women and children were running constantly from bombs being dropped on them because Gaza had been set in a position where they could open up to Hamas. And so you've got a constant demand by the terrorists, Hamas, Hezbollah, and others, to destroy the state of Israel. And Israel has been a great ally of the United States since its inception in 1948. We need to send a very strong signal, and I think we're doing it right now today, a very strong signal that this country, this Congress, and the Senate supports the state of Israel and does not want the Palestinians to go to the United Nations and try to have a unilateral settlement made by that body. This is something that has to be worked out at the conference table between Israel and the Palestinians, and not at the United Nations. So I'd just like to conclude by saying that Israel is our best friend and ally in the Middle East. They're a stable element in the Middle East. We need to support them and make absolutely sure that Hamas, Hezbollah, and the other terrorist organizations do not have their way and destroy the State of Israel. We are committed to that. This Congress is committed to that. And this whole debate has shown very clearly that almost unanimously the people of the United States stand with Israel. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Florida.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. With that, I yield back the balance of our time, and I'd like to ask for the yeas and nays at the appropriate time.
All time has expired, and the question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to House Resolution 268? And those in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair,
Madam
two-thirds
Speaker,
being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. Gentlelady from Florida.
on that I request the yeas and nays.
Yeas and nays are requested, and those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays in order are ordered, and pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 515 as amended.
The clerk will report the resolution.
H.R. 515, a bill to reauthorize the Belarus Democracy Act of 2004.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Ros-Lehtinen, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Burton, will each control 20 minutes, and the Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Florida.
I thank the Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on H.R. 515, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection, the gentlelady is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record letters from 2 committee chairmen, one from Judiciary and one from Financial Services, on the measure before us. I would also like to thank
Covered by general leave.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'd also like to thank Chairman Smith and Chairman Baucus for their cooperation in allowing this bill to proceed so swiftly to the floor. Madam Speaker, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 515, the Belarus Democracy and Human Rights Act of 2011. I would like to thank my distinguished colleague and friend, Mr. Smith, for introducing this timely and important measure. Belarus has been correctly deemed the last dictatorship of Europe. Under the iron hand of Lukashenko and the Belarusian people, they have endured the systematic denial and violation of their basic freedom and human rights. The authorities in Belarus have severely restricted free speech and independent media. Pro-democracy political activists are subject to beatings and imprisonment. The regime's heavy-handed tactics were fully utilized in last December's fraudulent election for president. According to our own Department of State's Human Rights Report, and I quote, authorities denied citizens the right to change their government, manipulating the December 19th presidential election to ensure that the president would not be seriously challenged. Security forces beat detainees and protesters, used excessive force to disperse peaceful demonstrators, and reportedly used torture during investigations. And it continues. A crackdown on post-election demonstrations led to the arrest of over 700 activists, including criminal charges against 5 presidential candidates and numerous activists and journalists, end quote. Unfortunately, the regime, despite its repeated promises of reform, continues this campaign of repression against its own people. In response to the rumors that peaceful protesters were planning to gather on Belarusian Independence Day, July 3rd, just recently, to show their opposition to the regime by clapping their hands, the dictator stated, and I quote, stomping, clapping, bellowing, and roaring on squares and streets cannot solve problems. The state has the resources and power to pacify those who violate the law and the Constitution, end quote. And we have now seen Lukashenko did indeed use the state's power to pacify the demonstrators. How? He ordered the authorities to start by firing tear gas at the protesters, followed by the violent beating and imprisonment of those who dared to clap their hands. Over 300 activists were arrested, and today 140 were convicted on such dubious charges as being hooligans or participating in unsanctioned demonstrations. This unrelenting persecution of the Belarusian people by the regime is simply unacceptable. The U.S. and other responsible nations must support the pro-democracy forces in Belarus and hold the authoritarian regime in Minsk accountable for its growing abuses. That's why I'm pleased to support this important measure, which, among other things, condemns the conduct of the recent presidential elections and the crackdown on opposition candidates and activists, expresses a sense of Congress that the President should continue to support radio, television, and Internet broadcasting to the people of Belarus, and expands on existing sanctions, including the denial of visas to any member of the Belarusian government who participated in the crackdown on opposition leaders, journalists, and peaceful protesters that occurred in connection with the December elections. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I reserve the balance of my time, and I ask unanimous consent that the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on African, Global Health, and Human Rights, Mr. Smith, be allowed to manage the remainder of our time, Madam Speaker.
Without objection, the gentleman from New Jersey will control the balance of the time. The gentleman from California.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will be the only speaker to speak from our side on this resolution, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this legislation. On December 19th of last year, Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko staged a fraudulent election. Immediately afterward, he had the opposition candidates arrested, and this May, almost all of them were sentenced to prison. The Lukashenko regime has continued to harass members of opposition political parties, human rights activists, and civil society, and to suppress Belarusians' access to free press and information. Over the past month, an increasing number of Belarusians have gathered to protest against Lukashenko and the deteriorating economic situation there. The Obama administration has reacted strongly to the fraudulent elections and post-election crackdown. On February 2nd, the U.S. significantly expanded the list of Belarusian officials subject to travel sanctions and to have their assets blocked, and restored full U.S. sanctions against Belarus's largest state-owned oil and gas concern. On July 2nd, Secretary Clinton met with activists from Belarus during her visit to Lithuania for a meeting of the Community of Democracies and repeated her demand that Belarus release political prisoners and embark on the path of democratic reform. In coordination with the European Union, the administration has significantly expanded democracy assistance to Belarus this year from $11 million to $15 million. We must continue to call for the reopening of the OSCE office in Minsk and for the government of Belarus to fully cooperate with an OSCE fact-finding mission requested by 14 participating states under the Moscow mechanism. And we must continue to demand the release of many heroic individuals still languishing in Belarusian prisons without access to their families or legal counsel. Europe's last dictatorship should not be allowed to stand unchallenged. I support this legislation, encourage my colleagues to do the same, and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
And the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, let me thank Chairwoman Ileana Slayton for her leadership in bringing this bill to the floor today, to the Majority Leader and the Speaker for scheduling, and to Howard Berman for his strong support of it as well and his very eloquent statement just a moment ago. Madam Speaker, I rise in strong support of H.R. 515, the Belarus Democracy and Human Rights Act of 2011. The bill demonstrates our strong and sustained promotion of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in Belarus through targeted sanctions against this brutal dictatorship of Alexander Lukashenko. H.R. 515 reinforces earlier law, the Belarus Democracy Act of 2004 and the Belarus Democracy Reauthorization Act of 2006, both of which passed the House and Senate with overwhelming bipartisan support and were signed into law. This legislation is timely and necessary. The fraudulent December 19th elections in 2010 in Belarus and the ongoing crackdown on democracy activists, independent journalists by the Lukashenko dictatorship underscore the need for democracy-promoting legislation. Immediately after the election, the government responded to peaceful protests against electoral fraud with savage mass beatings and large-scale detentions, over 700 people. Later on, Madam Speaker, I will put in the record the list of many of the activists, many of whom are already in jail, their sentences, and these are men and women whose only crime was asking that Belarus matriculate from dictatorship to a democracy. Of those charged, 40 have been convicted, and some receiving very harsh sentences, up to 6 years. And of course, after those 6 years are over, what Lukashenko and his cronies usually do is find some reason to extend those jail sentences. So these sentences are awful indeed. As Ileana Ros-Lehtinen pointed out a moment ago, the chairwoman of our committee, this also includes 5 of the 9 presidential candidates who ran against Lukashenko. Their families, lawyers, journalists, and democratic activists continue to be harassed and intimidated. It is the worst political crackdown in Europe in over a decade. And it's ongoing, Madam Speaker. The repressive regime in Belarus was in full force earlier this week as police broke up protesters attempting to mark their country's Independence Day. Hundreds were detained. 140 already received administrative sentences or fines, including independent journalists, reporting on rallies held across the country. The post-election has followed the pattern of repression that has characterized Lukashenko's 17-year rule. Through a series of rigged elections, large-scale intimidation, and suppression of independent media and civil society, the dictator has long since consolidated his control over virtually all national institutions. His dictatorship, as has been said, is the worst of any in Europe today. Perhaps most significantly about the legislation, the bill supports targeted sanctions. It expresses a sense of the Congress to deny the privilege of visiting our country to senior Belarus officials, their immediate families, and others involved in human rights violations and anti-democracy actions, including those involved in the December 19th post-election crackdown. Likewise, it has provisions prohibiting U.S. government financing, except for humanitarian goods and ag products or medical products, and non-humanitarian loans from international financial institutions to the Belarusian government, blocking assets owned by the Belarusian government, senior leadership or their families, and others involved in anti-democratic actions. These sanctions are aimed at the senior leadership of a dictatorship that displays utter contempt for the dignity and rights of the Belarusian people, and with these sanctions we stand with the Belarusian people against their oppressors. Madam Speaker, I have many other comments I'd like to make, but I would ask you to consent my full statement be part of the record.
Without objection.
And I yield back the balance of our time.
Gentleman, this time, the gentleman from California.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Yields back the balance of his time, and the gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 515 as amended? And those in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The gentleman from Florida rise.
Madam Speaker, I send to the desk a privilege report from a committee on rules for filing under the rule.
And the clerk will report the title.
Report to accompany House Resolution 337, resolution providing for consideration of the bill, H.R. 2354, making appropriations for energy and water development and related agencies for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2012, and for other purposes.
Referred to the House calendar and ordered printed. Pursuant to House Resolution 320 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House and the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the further consideration of H.R. 2219. Will the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Bishop, kindly take the chair?
Shorts on and flip-flops like they should be.
The House is in the Committee of the Whole on the State of the Union for further consideration of H.R. 2219, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill making appropriations for the Department of Defense for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2012, and for other purposes.
When the Committee of the Whole rose earlier today, Amendment number 31, printed in the Congressional Record offered by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Carter, had been disposed and the bill had been read through page 122, line 19. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments printed in the Congressional Record on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Amendment number 1 by Mr. Connolly of Virginia. Amendment 23 by Mr. Brown of Georgia. Amendment 2 by Mr. Connolly of Virginia. An amendment by Mr. Kucinich of Ohio. Amendment 21 by Mr. Brown of Georgia. An amendment by Mr. Welch of Vermont. Amendment 22 by Mr. Brown of Georgia. Amendment 26 by Mr. Mosh of Michigan. And an amendment by Mr. Sessions of Texas. The Chair will reduce to 2 minutes the time for any electronic vote after the first vote in the series. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on Amendment number 1, offered by the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the nays prevailed by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment 1, offered by Mr. Connolly of Virginia.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
The U.S. House came back from their 4th of July recess and picked up where they left off. Before the recess, they had finished general debate on the fiscal year 2012 spending bill for the Defense Department. This afternoon, beginning at 2 o'clock Eastern, they worked their way through a number of amendments and hear a series of, say, a dozen or so votes in the House on proposed amendments to that defense spending bill. This first one is an amendment by Jerry Connolly of Virginia, an amendment which would transfer $10 million from operations and maintenance to research. First one here is a 15-minute vote, and lots more to follow after that. The House approved moments ago by voice vote the Belarus Democracy Reauthorization Bill. They also debated a bill dealing with U.S. commitment to a negotiated settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and just moments ago they moved the rule onto the floor of the Energy and Water Spending Bill for 2012. The rule was announced on the floor, and that bill may come up later this week in the U.S. House. But today, and likely through the rest of the evening and into tomorrow, more work on defense spending for fiscal year 2012. The issue of military spending came up today during President Obama's first Twitter town hall held at the White House this afternoon, which, by the way, you can see on our website at cspan.org. The President was asked about potential cuts in defense spending, and here was his response.
We've ended the war in Iraq, our combat mission there, and all our troops are slated to be out by the end of this year. We've already removed 100,000. I announced that we were going to begin drawing down troops in Afghanistan and pivot to a transition process where Afghans are taking more responsibility for their defense. But we have to do all of this in a fairly gradual way. We can't simply lop off 25% off the defense budget overnight. We have to think about all the obligations we have to our current troops who are in the field and making sure they're properly equipped and safe. We've got to make sure that we are meeting our commitments for those veterans who are coming home. We've got to make sure that in some cases we've got outdated equipment that needs to be replaced.
And so I'm committed to reducing the defense budget, but as Commander-in-Chief, one of the things that we have to do is make sure that we do it in a thoughtful way that's guided by our security and our strategic needs. And I think we can accomplish that. And the nice thing about the defense budget is it's so big, it's so huge, that a 1% reduction is the equivalent of the education budget. I'm exaggerating, but it's so big that you can make relatively modest changes to defense that end up giving you a lot of headroom to fund things like basic research or student loans or things like that.
President Obama earlier today from his Twitter town hall at the White House commenting on military spending. And by the way, we are going to show you all of that town hall from earlier today. You'll see that later in our program schedule here on C-SPAN. But if you can't wait, you can go online and watch it. We have it linked in the column on our homepage that says Recent Events on C-SPAN. You can find the town hall, which ran just over 2 hours. Back here live on the House floor, the first in a series, a number of amendment votes to the 2012 defense spending bill, a bill that would allocate $530 billion for regular programs of the Pentagon. That's a 3% increase over the previous bill. It includes $119 billion for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We spoke to a Capitol Hill reporter earlier today for some insight into what else is in the defense spending bill. Joining us is John Donnelly of Congressional Quarterly. As you watch debate on the 2012 defense bill, what are some of the key amendment debates and votes that you're keeping your eye on?
Well, one of the things that is going to be interesting is to see whether or not there will be anything to restrict funding for the U.S. military operations in Libya. During the last week of June, the House held a couple of votes demonstrating that they don't really have support for cutting off or curtailing funding for the Libyan campaign, nor do they have the votes to endorse the campaign. And so it's going to be interesting to see whether anything can be fashioned that would be able to pass one way or the other.
Because there's been talk before the defense debate that there may be a number of amendments offered on Libya.
Yes, absolutely. Several have been filed. Tom Cole, a Republican from Oklahoma, has a number of amendments that would cut off funding entirely or flatly. Another that would cut it off unless Congress authorizes U.S. involvement in those hostilities, as the president calls them. And then Dennis Kucinich from Ohio, along with Justin Amash, a Republican from Michigan, are working on one that I think is the likeliest to see a vote, which would basically block spending for the operation. But there really isn't enough support for that, because we saw in late June that the House rejected an amendment by Tom Rooney that would have limited funding for the operation to only support activities like refueling planes in flight and surveillance and reconnaissance missions. That did not succeed. But as I mentioned, neither was the House successful in passing something by Alcee Hastings that would have endorsed the operation.
One more quick thing about Libya. The Senate this week was supposed to begin debating the U.S. role in Libya. What's happened to that debate?
Well, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee a week ago passed 14-5 a resolution by Senators John Kerry and John McCain that would have authorized, in essence, the Libya operation. That was to see a vote this week, but Harry Reid pulled it from the floor at the last minute. It seems to have become a victim of the debate on the overall federal spending situation. But we may see that next week.
Back to the defense bill in the House. Is the underlying bill likely to pass? Are there other areas of contention or dollar figures that will prove to be sticking points in the House debate?
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be any kind of really major funding battle on the bill this year. It will certainly pass. It funds the basic operations of the Defense Department, as well as the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It doesn't contain any money, by the way, for Libya, but funds in the bill could be redirected toward Libya later if the Defense Department wanted. But there aren't that many major issues. There will probably be a vote or two about Afghanistan and some redirecting of money. For example, we've already seen some debate that would shift money from weapons or maintenance programs toward medical research in the defense budget. So there are a number of sort of small caliber debates that will be going on.
An update on the defense spending bill from John Donnelly of Congressional Quarterly, and keep track of his articles at CQ.com. Thank you for the update.
My pleasure.
And the House is in a series of 9 amendment votes to that fiscal year 2012 defense spending bill. This first one, 15 minutes, and all the following votes will be 2-minute votes. The Pentagon bill for 2012 includes $119 billion for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Earlier today, the second-in-command in Afghanistan, Lieutenant General David Rodriguez, briefed reporters at the Pentagon. He was in Kabul, Afghanistan, and he was asked about violence, the increase in violence in Afghanistan. We're going to show you those comments and more from earlier today while this vote continues.
Indicator of progress is really how the Afghan people go about their daily business and participate in their daily lives and participate in their government. But we look at 6 factors. We look at the strength of the threat, the strength of the Afghan National Security Forces, the strength of the government, and the strength of the people as they go about their daily business. And we take a combination of those things to include the violence levels as you stated.
I'm going to take my follow-up. When do you anticipate, when would you anticipate the overall violence level would go down? I mean, in Iraq, it was, by 6 months into the surge, saw violence in Iraq go down dramatically. Here in Afghanistan, we are way longer into the surge, and the overall level of violence has not gone down. Do we think is it fair to assume that we will see that go down later this summer, or could it be next year?
That remains to be seen. It will actually probably be next year. And what the difference is, of course, is that it's a rural insurgency. So what we see happening is the violence is now on the edges of the population center instead of the center. And also there is a significant increase in direct fire attacks that are very, very ineffective. And that's what we'll see continue as a trend into the future until it starts to decrease sometime in the future.
Jennifer?
General, it's Jennifer Griffin from Fox News. What evidence are you seeing of Iranian involvement in the conflict in Afghanistan? We've heard reports from Senator Graham speaking about, who's recently back from Afghanistan, speaking about Iran positioning weapons in Afghanistan. But in the past, when we've asked this question, we hear that there have been a few interceptions of weapons, but not many. Can you point to any change in Iranian involvement?
It's been pretty consistent, ma'am, and that level is just about the normal level of arms and ammunition that crosses borders in this volatile region each year, and they have not increased significantly in the past 2 years.
Can you quantify how many you're intercepting on, in a given time period?
No, I can't, ma'am. You can get that information from us later, but like I said, it's not any increase or decrease, and it's been pretty consistent for the last several years.
Tom?
Sir, it's Tom Shanker from the New York Times. Again, thanks for your time today. My question is about the Afghan security forces, which you've cited as a rising capability, but you also referenced the hotel attack. As we sit back here in Washington, it's hard for us to understand whether that was a glass half empty or a glass half full. Yes, indeed, local forces resolved that, but the attack itself was quite violent, I'm sure quite disturbing to you. Give us your after-action review of that and what lessons you've learned, what it says about the capabilities of local security forces.
Well, in the Intercontinental Hotel attack, the Afghan security forces responded very, very quickly.
with the Crisis Response Unit, who were the ones who led the way as they cleared the floors of the Intercontinental Hotel and basically put the enemy on in a situation where what they did was they ran through the hotel up to the top of the hotel, which is where the remaining enemy was killed by the combined force. And they also, afterwards, there was a fire after a couple of suicide bombers set themselves off with a very small loss of civilian life, and they responded with a fire department who came and put the fire out. And again, it was a great response. They were very, very effective, and they all put it together very, very quickly. They have done that multiple times in the past, and I believe they'll continue to do that more effectively each time.
So, sir, the response was very professional and positive. We understand that. But was there a gap in capability or intelligence or security that allowed the attack to take place? And have you tried to plug that?
The intelligence support that required to prevent those attacks continues to get better. And the number of those attacks that are thwarted are many, many times greater than the individual ones that get through like that, and we believe that that will continue to be a positive trend in the Afghan security forces here in Kabul.
General David Wood from the Huffington Post. You mentioned that there had been a 300% increase in cases that you're uncovering, and I wondered if you could tell me a couple of things about that. Number one, how many cases we're talking about? And secondly, if these are ammunition and bomb-making materials and so forth, is there any indication that the insurgents are actually running short as a result of your uncovering these cases?
Yeah, the caches are multiple sizes, so I couldn't give you a characterization of the exact number. But the bottom line is we have destroyed the support bases and their supplies and put a significant decrease in their capability to supply themselves. At the same time, we're interdicting the supplies that are coming in, and absolutely there has been much intelligence that says that they are having a tough time supplying themselves as easily and in as much volume as they would desire.
Kevin Barron from Stars and Stripes. In your opening, you seem to, as many of your superiors in Washington have, support the president's drawdown plan and pace. You said it's a good plan. It's a goal that's achievable. But do you think that there is any unnecessary risk in that plan that has been criticized since the announcement?
No, I don't. The decision's been made, and now it's our turn to execute the decision, and we can do that without a significant change in risk that puts any of the mission at risk at this point in time.
Okay.
General Chuck Hoskinson from Politico. You said before that with the problem of infiltration of Taliban into Afghan security forces, as the Afghans take over more and more responsibility, that there might be a need to accept a greater risk in terms of dealing with that problem. How would you assess the possibility of that risk going forward now, and what steps would you be taking to mitigate it?
The mitigation of that risk is being done by a combination of counterintelligence efforts by all the coalition forces, but most importantly, the Afghan National Security Forces are taking this head on. And it's an issue of leadership and knowing your people. And again, the Afghan leadership and the chain of command has taken that on, and believe we're moving in the right direction with that risk.
Okay. Michael Hoffman with Defense News. Good morning, General. I was wondering, just to change the subject real quick, with the upcoming transition coming within the Army, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your interactions with General Odierno and your thoughts on his leadership for the Army going forward.
I've had just one interaction with him at a Forest Aero conference on a video teleconference. But I've known General Odierno since we were 18 years old, and I'm confident he'll be a great leader.
The House today has been debating amendments to the fiscal year 2012 defense spending bill. They are in a series of 9 amendment votes. This first one at 15 minutes, an amendment and one of 2 from Jerry Connolly of Virginia that will get votes, recorded votes in this series of votes. And again, 9 votes on the House floor.
Vote. The yeas are 175, the nays are 241. The member is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 23, printed in the congressional record offered by the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Brown, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the nays prevail by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 23, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Brown of Georgia.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote. A 2-minute vote.
This and 7 other amendment votes on proposed amendments to the 2012 spending bill for the Pentagon. This by Paul Brown of Georgia. The Republicans' amendment would reduce operation and spending and transfer savings to the spending reduction account. A 2-minute vote, and all the remaining votes coming up will be 2 minutes as well.
The yeas are 87, the nays are 328. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on amendment number 2, offered by the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the nays prevailed by a voice vote. Clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 2, offered by Mr. Connolly of Virginia.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote rise and be counted. Sufficient number having risen, the recorded vote is ordered. Members record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote. Chair will ask members to stay close into the chamber. It is a 2-minute vote.
And 7 more 2-minute votes, including this one, on amendments to the 2012 Defense Department spending bill, a bill that allocates $530 billion for Pentagon programs. That's a 3% increase over 2010 levels. It would also include or would add $119 billion for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. A series of amendment votes here, and we expect the House, after this series of votes, to continue debating additional amendments to the 2012 bill.
On this vote, the yeas are 152, the nays are 266. The amendment is not agreed. Unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on an amendment offered by the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Kucinich, on which the further proceedings were postponed, on which the nays prevailed by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Kucinich of Ohio.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote rise and be counted. Sufficient number having risen. Recorded vote is ordered. Members record their votes by electronic device. This is another 2-minute vote.
And this amendment by Dennis Kucinich would transfer funds from the operation and maintenance budget to defense health programs. 2-minute vote, a couple of more amendment votes, and then the House will return to debate on amendments to the Pentagon 2012 budget. The representative from Ohio will have at least one amendment considered on ending Pentagon funding for Libyan war efforts, at least keeping it out of the 2012 budget. Dennis Kucinich and Justin Amash of Michigan also joining on the amendment still to be considered in the U.S. House, and that is likely to come up either later this evening or tomorrow as the House will continue consideration of amendments to the 2012 budget into this evening and likely into tomorrow as well. The Hill reports that earlier today, in earlier action on amendment by a voice vote, the House approved an amendment from John Carter that eliminates a section of the Department of Defense appropriations bill that would have limited funding for military bands to $200 million. By eliminating that language, the Hill writes, the House would allow the Department of Defense to fund bands up to $320 million, which DoD was planning for in fiscal year 2012 anyway.
On this vote, the yeas are 253, the nays are 167. The amendment is agreed.
Chairman.
The House will be in order. The House will be in order. Will members please take their conversations off their floor, take seats, and clear the well. Again, the House will be in order. It is also in order. For what purpose is the gentleman from Georgia